Hello, I'm Tamsen Webster, and you have just joined, or not joined, the Sense Giver office hours, which I do about once a month. What's a sense giver? Well, it's related to sense giving. And what sense giving? It is making things make sense for other people. It's a term originally originated by Joya and Chitty Petty. That would be Dennis Joya and Kumar Chitty Petty back in 1991. And I have taken that on as my own as a way to describe that whole concept of how do we make things make sense for other people. I'm personally of the opinion that sense giving is one of the most necessary skills that we can engage in as leaders, as speakers, authors, leaders of thinking, etc. And yet it's something that we are not trained in at all. And thus why I am focused on sense giving, and my Substack newsletter, The Sense Giver, is focused on that. All right. So speaking of my Substack newsletter, I wanted to talk a little bit today about, just as we get started and as we wait for our special guest, who I see has arrived in the background, this whole concept of the minimum viable elements of making things make sense, how humans make sense of things. This is, in my view, a really critical thing, because if something doesn't make sense to someone, if they can't make sense of it, they can't make meaning from it. And therefore if they can't make sense, they are immune to persuasion, they are immune to future action, etc., because nothing else happens if the sense making fails in the first place. So that means really always having front and center, what is it that somebody needs to have information wise in, like, through their own sense making process, or if you're trying to make something make sense to somebody else through the sense giving process, those minimum viable elements. And something that I'm increasingly seeing is that this is an X then because packet. And what I mean by X then is that there's kind of different ways this shows up. So for instance, when we first start to make sense of things as humans going through the world, we first observe, we experience that this happens and then this happens. And if we see that pair of this and then happen enough, then we start to lock it in as something that happens. And we may, for instance, if this happens, I throw a ball up, then that happens, the ball comes down, we may eventually learn that because is not just because I threw it up, it's because gravity exists. Over time, that becomes locked as a kind of rule in our minds, an automatic kind of go-to thing that we don't even think about, so that when something happens, then we know this other thing will happen because, and gravity still holds here, but, and this is where it gets tricky, the because often turns into because that's what it always does. We still need to know what that original because is, though. And then finally, if that is tested and that works out enough, that this then that becomes the when then gets tested out enough, my current thinking on this is that then it becomes predictive. We start to think, if I throw the ball up, then it will come down. Why? Because when I do that, then that happens, because I've seen it happen over and over again. And again, the underlying because is gravity. So just really thinking of this in the kind of this X then because unit is always going to be helpful, particularly when we're thinking about how to make something make sense to other people, which is a lovely segue to our guest today, who will be my friend and colleague, claiming you as a colleague, Andrew McCluskey, who works with this amazing agency focused on helping people who want to shift those paradigms at scale. That agency is called Viva Ellipsis. And so, Andrew, you're coming in today with a different hat on, and let's hear about that hat and what the question is that you've got. So Jen's going to bring you up. Hello, Andrew.
Hey.
How are you?
Hi, Tamsen. How you doing?
Hello. All right. So bring me up to speed on the nonprofit so that we can have that piece of context in the background for us.
All right. So all of the work I do with agency is purely to feed the nonprofit. That's what I do on the planet.
That's
And the nonprofit grew out of my degree was psychology, and my final year project was how sound affects human performance. And I've just been fascinated by that all the way through. So I had an artist, I came over to America 26 years ago to do music, and one of my music projects was music to work to. Because I knew from my studies that with a little bit of oral stimulation, you can actually raise cognitive output. So I thought, well, I'm a pianist. So I had this brand, Music to Work To, where it was long form, not overly pattern driven, but recognizable enough so the brain could hang on to it, use it as stimulation, and then warm up the brain. And then, I would listen to it while I was writing papers. So that was the artist thing. And then it grew into music2.com, which was a distribution play around music. So, back in the day when Spotify came in, we grew up with albums, and then we went to singles, and then the playlist became the distribution container. And so we were a playlist play using SEO and community. So we developed this community at music2.com. And the basic promise of the community to people coming in was, if you come in and you grow an audience around a playlist, you will eventually be able to monetize that audience because you've got people's attention. And that would have worked in 2018, 2019. And yet Spotify changed the rules, the world that we're moving in changed, and the economic viability declined. So then we've got a community, a global community, that isn't really sure what it's here for. So at the same time, we found a mechanic that worked. We had two community members had a disagreement, and they were arguing quite vociferously. And I mediated, and the result was, let's make a collaborative playlist together. And they did, and it was game-changing. Because you had two people with opposing views who agreed that they would make a collaborative trade tracks playlist. And it's so simple. It's like, you like music, I like music. I send you a track, you listen to it, and you go, oh, I like that. That track reminds me of this. And you go back and forth, exchanging a bit of yourself in that exchange. And there's an output. There's a playlist, which is a memory, a capture of your creative collaboration. And you get to know somebody in an area of shared agreement. So this was game-changing for us. And then we grew this community, and we didn't have an economic model, and we realized that we didn't want to be extractive. So we spun the nonprofit out of that. And so we now have a nonprofit. So the Music 2 Foundation works with music to solve big human problems. That's what we do. And the big human problem we're solving right now is othering. And this is where we see it all the time. You get the extremes on the left and the right and the demagogues, and they're telling us that if you don't agree with me, not only are you wrong, but you're stupid, and actually you're evil, and that we can hate you. And we think this is absolute nonsense. And so our foundation works to change that.
Okay.
So that's all the context.
Just little things. Just a little thing. Yeah.
Just the little things. So the engine of that, the foundation has 4 programs. So what the .com is this brilliant global community. We've done 650 projects across 40 plus countries. We've had hundreds of people come in. And the output of that, these playlists, drive the .com visibility. And now we have thousands of artists who come to us and they submit their tracks. And what we're now doing is we're asking these artists emotions on Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. So we're going through the 13 of them. So the first one is fear. What are you afraid of? We had 3,500 people answer that, and we segregated across continent and by generation. So we've got this awesome data set. We're now asking them, what are you surprised by? And so we're going to go for 5,000 responses. Then we're going to go to disgust. So we have this now data about how creatives are feeling across the globe, which is cool. And we're now pushing that into a Substack. So now we've got a Substack that's literally just sharing one insane human story and not asking for anything in return, but just a really low closed cognitive loop where you can connect with a human being. all of this is predicated on the success of the .com. And the .com is sitting there at the moment not knowing what it is, because it was for music lovers and people who are motivated to grow an audience, but it's not that anymore. We know that the collaborative playlist experiment is good, but you generally do 4 or 5 or 6. And if you don't make a real life connection inside the community, you tend to move out. So the flow of a human being through the community is typically high activity, it's great, and then they plane off. So we now need to architect the .com for a particular audience and architect it correctly. And we are doubling down on artists.
Okay.
So what is the positioning to the artist? Because and we're now here, so thank you for the time getting the context of where we are. What's the promise to the artist? Because we know artists want visibility. They are coming in and they're coming to music2.com to give their track to our community so that their track goes on playlists and we distribute their playlist, across all the major platforms. That's what they want. But that's very super transactional. But we also know that we've got this community mechanic that if there are artists who are very transactional, but we know that artists are lonely because we got that from the fear data. We know they want connection. We know they're terrified of failing.
Yep.
And we've got this community that we could architect for them. And what I'm asking your help for is how do we make this understandable to an artist coming in so that we can somehow filter out the really transactional ones, because we have a lot of data on that. There are some artists that are just, I don't give a shit. We want to filter them out. But how do we make the case for connection and community to artists when a lot of them don't even know that's possible?
Okay. Again, small task. First caveat, may not solve it right now, but so a couple things. I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing and then I want to spend a little bit more time on was this idea of one of the things you said was we don't necessarily we kind of want to weed out, that may not have been your word, the more transactional people, because you're more interested in the people who are, my words, not yours, kind of either actively or latently looking for that kind of community and connection that you believe that the .com provides. Correct?
Yes.
Or adjust or refine what I just said so that I make sure that I'm operating on clarity.
Communities are really hard. Communities are insane, particularly digital communities. So if you have a very transactional community, somebody comes in, gets what they want and leaves, you don't have a community.
Right.
So you want to architect your community for the kind of people that are naturally aligned for connection or who are interested and curious about other people. And to an artist who is looking for audience for their track, one of what I know this to be true, one of the best ways to have your track exposed to a new audience is have another person with an audience bring your track to their audience, like we're doing on Substack. So because we will get the artist to make a collaborative playlist. Collaboration will still be at the heart of the community, and access to the community will be making a collaborative playlist with another artist. You can put your track on the playlist, which will then be exposed to that artist's audience, and it's alignment for the artist, it's alignment for music too. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the basic, and this isn't just sense making, one of the basic rules of marketing, frankly, is just that whatever you put out is what is to some extent going to be what you draw in. So for me, as I'm thinking about this, how do I want to talk about this? What would seem like the obvious answer, but you've already taken it off the table. I'm not saying it's the obvious. What we generally say is the obvious answer is like, oh, well, they want exposure. Let's anchor it on exposure, etc. And then you have already said that what that gets for you are people who are interested in exposure. And if they don't get that, or if they don't get anything else, then they tend to wash out, etc. Yeah. So what that means is it's like we've got to figure out a different anchor for where that's going. So if we go back to those like minimum viable sense making elements, like those kind of smallest possible elements, and we go back to that kind of idea of if, then, because, because we've talked about this before, so much of it anchors on the if. And what we're trying to do there is articulate in the if. I like to frame it as a question. Happy to talk more about why, but I like to frame it as a question that serves as a qualifying question for both the artist and for you, the community, so that you can each say the question serves as the artist because they say, I have this question. Oh, let me explore this community because they're saying they have an answer to this question. It's qualifying for the community because you're saying, if you're not already asking some version of this question, this probably isn't the right place for you. Right. So does that make sense? Let me pause.
Yeah, no, I'm loving it. I'm so happy that we're doing this.
Yay! Fabulous.
Yeah.
Because I'm inclined towards, right. So if we're starting to think about what that would be, yeah. So while you can offer exposure, that's kind of like what you're finding is, yes, exposure and community. And what I'm hearing you say is you're looking for people who already at some level are looking for that connection, community, collaboration, opportunity. And in those kinds of situations, this other thing of exposure becomes what Seth Godin would call a free prize inside, right? It's not what's drawing them to the community. It's this extra cherry on top of being in the community because, oh, by the way, you also get this other thing that's attractive to you, rather than saying, hey, let's dangle that because I'm sure you want that, but I'm not sure you want the other stuff that we're really about. Let's start here.
That's 100% aligned. Matt and I have been spending a lot of headspace in this, and he's very, very strong on you cannot lead with the SEO benefits or the audience benefits because you are architecting for the short-term transaction, which won't actually deliver the real promise of connection and collaboration and all the things that come from it.
That's right. And even if you do deliver that SEO stuff, if all the follow-on experience and messaging of the platform is around the other things, then you start to create this gap and this break in expectation between the audience, the artists, and you. And you don't want that, because as soon as there's that break, then you start to erode the trust, the very community that you want to be building in the first place. So based on what you've said, I would say pursuing a question along the lines of, how can I find or, make it bigger, how can I find or collaborate with other, I put it in brackets, but that's a choice there, interesting artists like me, right? So do you see what I'm saying? Like that, if they're looking for that, like if they're not at least at some level looking for that, sounds to me based on what you've said, they'd never be happy here. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, I'm looking to, and you can say underneath why you might be looking for that. You're looking for collaboration, you're looking for community, you can define what you mean, but like why other people would find, but again, what you're looking for is that question that starts at kind of as far along their awareness as they would, like one of the ways I like to explain this is, I know you've spent a lot of time in the US, but have you ever seen The Price is Right, which is an American game show?
For sure.
Okay. And on various, it's a weird analogy, but like on various games, there's like a red acrylic perspex, I think other people call it, like range for the prices, right? And one of the games is that you have to like move the perspex, you have to move that red acrylic so that it's spanning where they think the price is going to be, right? Yep. And if the price is revealed to be within that range somewhere, woohoo, they win. And if it's not, all right. Think of this question as that red perspex, as that red acrylic range, right? Okay. It's like that question should capture the people that you're looking for, and it should leave out, right, if they're not already asking this question at some level, you don't want to help them. And it's not that you're like they're bad people and that you couldn't help them. It just means that if they're not already asking some version of a question that's in that range, then you're going to be spending a lot of your time convincing them to want that question. And that's wasting a lot of people's time. Right. So I like to think of this as like this, thinking of this question or even a range of questions as, if somebody's not already in this range of at least finding other artists like them, right? Or finding other artists that have interests or taste or something in common, or even it doesn't have to be in common, right? So you could choose, instead of find, how can I collaborate? How can I find a community? Those start to be a little further into that red space. Do you see what I mean? Like if like starting to say, I want to collaborate with someone means you're starting to cut out the people who are just kind of looking to connect with people. Right. But if you say, like, if you put the question at how can I get more exposure, like, or how can I get my work in front of more or in front of other artists, that may be like the outer edge of what you'd be willing to cover in like the range of the folks that you want. Do you see what I mean?
100%.
But that's really, to me, like the big decision. And from working with me before, that once we've got that, then it starts to kind of wrap out from there. But given that, let's pause. What's coming for you with all of that, Andrew? What feels right or wrong?
No, I love the question. Yeah, and what was it? This, then that. Yep. When, then that. And if, then that. So this is, we're now in if stage. And the one thing that we have to wrestle with is, because of the nature of the audience, we've been with music lovers, not necessarily artists. And I think that's healthy. I think one of the things that the core nature of our mechanic is that you don't need to be a musician. You don't need to be an artist. The reason the collaborative playlist works as a connective mechanic is that 99% of the people on the planet love music. So, you can literally, you don't need to have any skill to do this. And if we focus it too tight on the artists, and then the word collaborate can be perceived as, I'll play my piano and you play your guitar. And it then becomes too restrictive, because we want it to be for anybody who loves music. But, the insight for me was, we were architecting too wide. We were casting our net too wide. And if we want music lovers, well, who are the biggest music lovers? Well, they're generally artists who are doing that. But I don't want to filter out people who just love music, because then you've got, not an elitist, but then you've got this moat that is just, that's against how the foundation is solving for othering.
So, which I hear, and you to some extent you can't have it both ways. And,
I know.
And what I mean, what it said. So the thing is that when you say we want it for anybody who loves music, that is how it feels, and I fully support that. But I'm gonna gently invite you to consider that what you actually mean by that is anybody who loves music and loves interacting with other people around that music. That's not everyone.
No, but see, that's what's the, music's on the side of the bus.
Yeah.
But what's the core behavior is collaboration.
Is it though? Or is that it's a way to achieve the thing, right, that they're looking for. And so that's one of the things that sometimes we have to discover, like, is it actually collaboration that they're looking for, or is the collaboration one of the ways to achieve that kind of more slightly more amorphous outcome. So just to give you another thing to think about, not saying this is the right answer, but it could be, another version of that question could be something like, how can I discover other music lovers like me?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, that feels great.
Because, well, tell me more about that. I don't want to say like, well, of course it is, but like, I mean, I want to know what feels right about it for you. I also want to kind of point out, like, do you see what it's doing? Because again, this is all about helping it make sense both to you, but to also other people. Do you see what that question does, as opposed to how can I discover music or something like that?
The reason it resonates with me is it solves a lot of the conversation we just had. So discovery, it's a powerful word, but it's music lovers that accommodates artists, non-artists, people who love music, but like me, is bringing them into it and is predicting or presupposing a connective act.
Correct. Yes, right. It's already seeding it into the question. And to me, this is part of it. What we're doing, I mean, one of the foundational elements of sense making is this idea of frames. So meaning like sense making, we have to give somebody a frame in which to make sense of something else. And so I think, and I'm not sure yet, that this question provides an initial frame for anyone else to make sense of anything else that comes back. Because if you're saying, hey, if you want to, the frame here is discovering other music lovers like you. Now, there's still a lot more work to do about what that discovery looks like, what kind of music lovers you're putting in there. What does like me mean? Does like me mean I just want people who share my taste? Could it also mean I want people like me who really want to push the edges of my taste? Great. Like, I mean, so you get to define within that, but by putting it that way, by creating that boundary, and this is now where I love that post by Martin Wall-Raven that you pointed me to, you're basically saying, we're operating within this frame. So if you're not interested in whatever might show up in this frame of discovering other music lovers like you, it's not that this isn't for you. We're not shutting you out because you can keep exploring, right? It's just saying it's probably not going to be as attractive to you. And it also frees you and Matt up to say, well, yeah, like if anybody else happens to stumble across it and is interested, great. But what we're really trying to do is serve this group of people that don't feel properly served right now.
100%. And you could even swap out other. I mean, there's curiosity, and curious is a word. It's one of our values. Because we are. I mean, how do I discover curious music lovers like me?
So, and I would say, so pros of that, you're injecting your value into that question, right? Con of that, one could argue that curiosity is already embedded in the desire to discover.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Second, right, the minute you start to pre-qualify the kind of things, like, again, it's just a choice. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if somebody goes, yeah, I'm not interested in curious music lovers, I'm just like, and what do you mean by curious? Do you mean like curious as in Curiouser said Alice, or do you mean like I'm interested in new stuff? So it's kind of like, again, it really does depend on what the community actually supports, because again, I don't know, whether or not like finding like music lovers, is that always going to be people who are quite expansive in their taste? Or are you also there for people who are just like so into their, not just Swedish death metal, but Swedish death metal from this particular neighborhood of Malmo, right? Like, and so, because I mean, those people need people too. And so do you see what I'm saying? So I don't know the answer, but we want to make sure that person, if you do serve that person, they don't feel excluded by that question, because you want to make sure that they don't feel excluded by
No, I absolutely hear that. And in your sense-making construct or sense-giving construct, it's what's the lowest, what's the lowest unit of understanding? And you're right. I mean, other is great because that's built into the actual mission of the foundation in terms of combating othering. So there's not that makes any sense within this construct, but
But if
actually
you're
that
discovering others, isn't that kind of cool? By discovering others, you're actually bringing them in, right? Like, and so that's the kind of thing, is like the only way to eliminate isolating othering is to find the others and bring them in, right?
Yeah.
And so like that, to me, I mean, again, the final test of any of this, particularly when we're talking about creating, what's in essence, like, you might, whether you want to think of it as a brand statement, we still need to figure out a name for this, but particularly for nonprofits, the theory of change is appropriate here, because what you're basically saying, again, from the for-profit side, is if you want to discover other music lovers like you, whatever that might mean, right? Then you need whatever it is that this platform provides. And from previous work that we've done, that means we still have to do that work of figuring out how do you describe it, because it's not just you need a platform. That's a thing. It's not a way to think about the thing, right? And so we're really saying, okay, well, what would make sense as a way of discovering other music lovers? Then there's probably those elements of, okay, well, we actually want to, like, what do you believe, both of you believe to your core is necessary for discovery and for finding like people, right? Even if like means people who like to find people who are different, right? Does that help? So
yeah, very much. And we've got this weird thing. We have a fire hose of global musicians, and we have their attention because we are offering them a thing that they want that's still like an opportunity to get their track heard. And so we're giving them, and we don't charge. That's the beauty of being a nonprofit as well, is that every other artist, community, or tool is ultimately extractive because they have to pay for their overheads and whatever. And we've all had experience as artists growing up. But to do it under a nonprofit vehicle, it means you never have to worry about that. And artists are so attuned to your no persuasion.
So that tells me, like, that some part probably somehow in the answer needs to telegraph relational over transactional, right? So because it's kind of, I don't know what that looks like yet, but if we're starting to build the narrative sense-making frame, right? That I personally like to make sure that we've got the kind of reasoning frame figured out first, but sometimes it helps to pull back to kind of a narrative sense-making frame. And for you to say, like, and what you started to do very naturally, which is why the narrative sense-making frame is useful, is you said, okay, if we want to discover other music lovers like me, in a narrative thing, once we've established something somebody wants and doesn't yet have, right? In this case, the answer to that question, the next natural thing is, well, why aren't we getting it right now? Like, what is the thing that's getting in the way? And you very naturally said, yeah, because right now everything is either about music discovery, right? Or it's about playlists, or it's about individual playlists. And oh, by the way, all of it is monetized and surveilled, right? And and that's a problem because, right? Like, if you're trying to create real connections, a real connection is really hard to do that, right? On a transaction than on a relationship. So then you're saying, so element number one in what's necessary is something relational. Now, is that enough? No, right? Like, that's where the other piece would come in. And again, that's how we start to bring and bridge and build that kind of sense-making frame. Sometimes it's just saying, okay, let's talk it through. Like, what else is necessary? It's not transactional. So it's not transactional. What is it? And if once we've got that, is that enough? Answer no. What else needs to be there in order to make it the kind of non-transactional thing that will actually pay off, that will make sense as a way to achieve discovery of other music lovers like me?
Yeah. And my brain's firing in all different directions.
No, I mean, and you know, as I said at the beginning, it's hard to say like, oh yeah, we're gonna like nail it right away.
No.
But again, when you come back to these elements, we can almost always say, all right, most sense making issues start with a question that's either too broad or it is located in the wrong place for what you're trying to achieve or what you actually have to offer, right? So like, and you came here with that. You said, hey, when we're talking about get your music heard, it's like it was too broad, and it was mismatched with what you're offering. Can your thing still do that? Yes. That's where the beautiful free prizeness comes into it, because ultimately the solution also pays off on that. But by starting the story there, by starting with that framing of transaction, everything else is going to be like evaluated through that lens. And it doesn't make sense why I would need a community to get my stuff heard. That's not required. But if I want to discover other music lovers like me, a community 100% makes sense. But again, free prize, the more people there are in the community, the more people there are to hear my music, so that you can then offer that as a benefit that now makes sense, right? Rather than being something that's just like, oh, hey, we've got this benefit. And that's just like, now it's attached to something.
Yeah. We know from behavior and data that the act of making a collaborative playlist is a change-making activity.
I can see that, yeah.
So, and we can now incentivize community and you can incentivize the more collaborative playlists you make, you know, then that's more opportunities for your music to be heard. Because when artists make a playlist with another artist, they cross audiences. So there's, yes, the core mechanic of collaboration is what enables you, because here's the other thing, foundational belief, you can't, I believe deeply you cannot monetize relationships. I mean, you can, because we just saw it in the last 20 years with the arrival of Facebook and whatever, and they monetized the crap out of it. But it was dreadful, you know, apart from that initial thing. So yeah. So
because what it does is it takes a very natural human value, which is reciprocity, and replaces it with revenue generation, right? And almost always in revenue generation, now we've taken natural motivation out of it, and now we've introduced a power dynamic, because we've introduced a third thing, right? We've introduced money, which is a third thing, then two people, right? Like when it's just reciprocity, when it's like you've done a thing, I'll do a thing. By the way, the research says that is like the one like pervasive multicultural number one baseline value is reciprocity. As soon as you put a third thing in, you can't be reciprocal because there's a third thing, right? And revenue, money adds a third thing. And so like, again, this is one of those basic things where it's like, yeah, we can talk about it in terms of reciprocity, but it's also like, it's math. You can't have a two-way thing with a third thing present. Like, it's like, it warps it. So to me, it says that on your, like, as you're starting to figure out, okay, what's necessary. Now, this is where we get back to the reasoning piece, is to say, clearly, collaboration is, you're saying that one of the ways to discover other music lovers like me, you're saying that requires collaboration, right? We know that it's sitting outside or something like it that checks can we have a transactional collaboration? It's harder, right? You know, so again, it doesn't mean collaboration is it. We may need to, you know, kind of go drive further to like.
There was the point that I didn't quite close. So because I went down the commercialization of relationships, but in a lot of communities, there is either a commercial output for the community, and then when you think how you connect in a community is just, it's strange. You go to a Discord, or you go through somebody's profile, it's like, how the hell, what do you do? So then they have community joint mechanics, but then if it's a mature community and I'm new, and you whereas, so the efficacy of most communities, online communities that I know, in terms of developing real connections between humans, is lame. Whereas this thing where you create something together, there's something powerful about creating in a duality, because it's limited, you don't need muscle memory for it. It's limited cognitive load. The output far outweighs the input in terms of what you get back socially. And you have that, we see the communication between two people change, and because by the end, you're no longer strangers, because you've created something together. And it's just wildly powerful.
So in a question, so, and this is normal in a good way, that the tendency is to jump forward and to say, look at all this other cool stuff that happens, right? And so one of the things that, and again, it's all valuable, so I'm not saying it's not, it's just that these are some of the harder conversations, or it's not harder, it's just that our own thoughts make sense to us, right? And because we're just operating them all the time. And the moment we have to try to explain them to something else is actually when we have to start to abstract this thing that makes perfect sense to us into something else that like can transfer. And so we try to skip to the things that we're like, yeah, but it'll help you. Right? Or the creation is awesome.
This is good. You should do it. It will change your life.
Exactly.
You're right. You can't.
And so one of the evaluations to do when we're always, so if we've got an if, right, then we're trying to figure out the then piece of it. If we've got the X, then we've got to figure out the then of the Y. When concepts like this come up, it's about thinking about, is that the thing, or is that an input to the thing, or an output of the thing, right? And what you're trying to do is like back to that kind of sliding. We're really trying to find the thing that everything else depends on, right? You're really saying, listen, we can have creativity and whatever, but it doesn't matter if it's not doing X, or in order to get this other stuff that's really valuable for all these other things, this must be present. Right. And so whether that is, things like, so for instance, collaboration, you could see how that could lead to creativity, something new, emergence, because any number of theories and science fun stuff says that you need two things to get a new thing, right? Like two begets new. You can't get something new out of just one thing. So as soon as you start to collaborate, then you start to open the possibility of new, right? And so, but we can't say from what I'm hearing you say, like creativity doesn't come before the collaboration, right? It's coming as a result of it. So that tells me that like, I would kind of move it from consideration to, it's at least post collaboration. So now we're trying to see how far, is there anything else that's further up than collaboration, right? Or is collaboration where we're going, right? And
there is, of course, because now we're distilling down, and I love that we get to do this. And I so appreciate your time and expertise on this. It's brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is ultimately, we were talking about humans. We're talking about humans post-COVID. We're talking about, distributed individuals. We're talking about a loneliness pandemic. We're talking about 72 people of our respondents. What are they terrified by? It's being lonely.
Yeah.
So there is connection. So there is, and it's not so much connection, but it's whatever the opposite of loneliness is, because that's a big big thing.
Yeah.
So there's an almost like, I dislike loneliness. Let's define the edge there. But then it becomes about status. And I know that's a huge leap, but what does belonging, how do you feel, belonged to a thing? What online communities do, because of that visual interface, there are things like leaderboards, which I'm not a fan of when it comes to relationships and communities. I'm a fan of that for tracks, but there is, having run this for 10 years, people feel good when they're more visible. People feel good when they're closer to the executive. People feel good when they are seen to be part of something that's bigger than they are. So that's the real true offer of this, is come and be part of something cool. But what do we do with that?
Okay, so but that's it. So one of the things that's really helpful I have found with this whole if then thing is that it really helps to say, like, a lot of the time when we talk about things like that, we are just giving other versions of either the if or the then. So you see, I took loneliness and belonging and say those are often driving the question of how can I discover other music lovers like me. So to me, that's just saying, hey, how can we solve for loneliness? Whatever. If we want to solve loneliness, then whatever. Status, creativity, again, we already said with those are outputs of whatever this is. And so what we're trying to figure out is, what about, since you know that it's this community, what about this community is what provides the status and the creativity and the loneliness and the belonging? So, you were bringing up a concept that I would say the closest I could get to is proximity, right?
Yep.
Like, how can I discover other music lovers like me? And you start to see how, even if we just look at collaboration, reciprocity, proximity, personally, you may have a different opinion. One of those words pops as one that makes sense as a way to discover other music lovers like me, as like a clear, boom, I can see why that would help me do that. And I'm curious which one pops for you.
Proximity by a mile. Collaboration shouldn't sit anywhere in the language. I don't think.
Not at the core. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Because this is a thing that Bayesian probability, but this is what our brains do automatically, is that when you say, hey, if you want to discover other music lovers like me, and you say something like, well, you need something that gives you status, someone's like, what? Like, why? But as soon as you're saying, hey, you need to be you need proximity to what? Right. And again, this doesn't necessarily yet capture the collaboration piece of it, but it might be that collaboration is the mechanic by which you create proximity. Like,
100%. It is. Like, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't lead with the mechanic, would we?
But no.
No.
Exactly. Because what we're trying to do is we're really trying to have, and we've talked about this before, what we're trying to give people is what we're really transferring is how you think about this. Because if how you think about this is like, hey, we think that if you're near other people, digitally or otherwise, that are like you, that's how that you're not going to discover it if you're never actually near these people, if you have no way to get near to them, because it's only that proximity that allows you to kind of get that, see something up close, see the details, see that all the other stuff that happens. And so would there be other ways other than an online community to create proximity? Absolutely. Are there other ways to create that discovery? And then yes, absolutely. But your perspective is that, at least for now, I'm going to pin it for now, is that proximity is absolutely required in some form or another. And the way that you choose to do it, at least for now, is through this community, right? Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? Because now it gives people a reason. Well, not just what are you asking me to do, or what are you asking me to engage in, but why are you asking me to do that? And the tendency is that we want to, when we say why a community, we tend to keep going back to features and benefits, which are just other ways of saying the if and the then. But
Yep.
proximity is not one of those two. It is a why, about why a community would get you there. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So you look horrified, Andrew. So
oh no, I'm not horrible. I'm absolutely thrilled.
good.
It's the deep work. it's not easy.
No, it's not, because I think it's because it is an underdeveloped skill. Because what I've seen over and over again is that once you start to use those kinds of just basic frameworks of going, wait, is that just another way to say like why somebody would be asking this, or is this just another way to say the benefit? Okay, fine. What about our thing provides status? What about our thing enables creativity? And you're like, well, one of those things is 100%. We've just actually gotten everybody together. And it's not just you've gotten them together, it's that you have a very specific perspective. You have a point of view on what getting everyone together, what aspect of that is critical to discovery of other music lovers like me. And you're just saying it's nearness. It's access, right? It's just being able to, like, you got to be able to like get in the room to be able to figure out which of the people in the room are the ones most like you, right? And so that's a piece of it. But we're already starting to move logically to proximity itself isn't enough, right? So that's where we're saying, okay, well, again, if proximity is just, let's hold that as a straw person in there for now, what would the other thing be? So again, we could get everybody there, and it's more likely that I'll discover. But now we're saying there's also problems with just bringing everyone together doesn't solve it, right? Because you're like, I may not actually interact with those people. They may not be the people. I may never find them. Like, what's the extra piece that you all think
there is? So in communities and, people, there is, okay, now you've got them in the room, there have to be cultural norms of behavior that new people can adopt that has zero risk for them in terms of there have to be cultural norms that are very obvious and very clear to everybody in the community.
Absolutely. But that would apply to any group, right? So I want something which is great. Like, you're going to need to have that. That's table stakes. Like, like a community isn't successful if you don't have norms. But
so the norm in our community is collaboration.
Okay. So but we'd already said that proximity is the precursor to collaboration. So proximity can hold collaboration. What I'm saying is there something about the nature of the proximity or something that happens? Again, it may be that collaboration sits in this other.
In my understanding of the logic, proximity sits before collaboration.
Right.
And so now we've got proximity, but then what is the cultural norm? What is the accepted social behavior? What is the core red thread that runs through the community?
Yeah.
And there is the act of human beings creating something together. Now we call that collaboration, but what's the core human behavior here? Is we are making something together that didn't exist before, that could only happen with two entities trading, because when you look at the behavior of that, when you create something with another person, there are basic social, constructs. I agree to give the time to listen and read what you put into me. So that's a low social agreement. Now, and I agree to do this, so they're going to go back and forth 5 times. So you get a 10-track playlist. So I am expending my time in this process, but the output is something that couldn't exist. AI couldn't touch this. I could make a playlist with an AI, sure, but great. I mean, then we'll go and be her, and we'll go down that rabbit hole. But in terms of the behavior here, is that listening and response, the reciprocity between two human beings who are creating something together that literally delivers something that is bigger than the sum of the individual parts and has so many outputs.
Yes. Okay. So I am going to suggest, again, I'm not saying we can solve this, but I am actually wondering if proximity isn't it. I actually think that what I'm hearing you say is that in order to discover, something has to be put in to be discovered, right? So I've put that right now as the word contribution, right? You can't get a collaboration if somebody doesn't put something in first. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think, and so as soon as we're thinking about that, then proximity is just, it's not, we don't want proximity there, because then it's like we don't just want people contributing individually near each other, right? To me, it brings back into the fold something like response or reciprocity, because what we're talking about is, if you're trying to discover other music lovers like you, then what you mean by collaboration is a system of reciprocal contributions. I give, you give, I give, you give. And
100%.
That is your community's definition of collaboration is reciprocal contributions. And you see how that in and of itself becomes a cultural norm, but it isn't. It isn't like basically saying, hey, we need norms. Well, no shit. Like, which norms? Sorry. Sorry, people. Do you see what I mean? Like, so to me, like, it's really about listening to because when words for each of us are always a shortcut. And what we're having to do when we make sense of something to somebody else is that we're having to break apart the words that we're using as a shortcut into their most load-bearing elements, right? So you can say, yeah, we've got to collaborate. But why? Well, because collaboration is reciprocal contribution. And in that case, because reciprocity does X and contributions does Y, that's why those two things, when fused together, will help you discover other music lovers like you.
Yes. Just yes.
So again, it may not be where you like finish, but like it's based on what you've said so far.
Tamsen.
It's something along these lines. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah, but for nonprofits doing this work, it's this, and I sure hope other people get to see this process, because you have taken my perspective on what we're doing and how to present it, hugely away from where I was starting, but accommodating all my previous paradigms. I'm now here. And that, I mean, that's amazing. I'm sure there's more work to do, but no, it's more people do it.
Yay. I mean, but this is what, I mean, thank you. But this is also what I'm trying to figure out loud. And the more that I can do it with people and people can see it and they're like, oh, I think this is what's happening. Like, please tell me. Because I think, yes, it is about it's about making explicit the actual paradigm that's in play when you're thinking about this. Now, is it this simple? Really? No. But what we're trying to do is find what reason why we do so much thinking about those different words is we're trying to find the words that do contain everything else, so that we're not eliminating the things that are important to you, right? Like we don't want to choose a word that basically cuts out something that's really critical to you. At the same time, we need it to allow for the benefits that it contains, right? So it is like deep. Is one of the reasons why I'm so currently and have always been so interested in linguistics, right? Because it's the words matter to what we're choosing here, and the more specific we can be, even if this doesn't end up being like market facing language, but to have the clarity of saying we're talking about people giving things in equal measure. Now you've yes, that could be a transaction, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about reciprocity, which does not have an imbalance in it, right? Like
Right.
it
Right.
is a perceived equal exchange. And the contribution is what keeps it from being transactional with money, right? We're making a contribution, and yes, you're going to define that, but it's probably either a taste contribution, a creative contribution, actually track contribution, something that, so that you're like, even if it's like, oh, I like that, I don't like that, that's also a contribution, right? That's going to help you understand
100%.
how to get there. So
it's for people who are working with people, but in communities or nonprofits where the rubber meets the road on how you change how a human feels. Yeah. And the brands have done this for years, but a shoe's a shoe, a sneaker's a sneaker, red is cool. Oh, Jordan likes them. I mean, so that's marketing, and that's pretty straightforward. But when you're working with human feelings and human time, this work becomes so much harder, but even more important. So it's brilliant.
And I would argue it is just as important to do it for brands where like a shoe is a shoe is a shoe, because it's like people are really skeptical now. And if they don't understand, like, and to me, again, this is current view, how you think about something, even at the brand level, even at the nonprofit level, is truly the only A, unique thing that you have, and B, it's how you think about something that, in my opinion, don't have anything to back this up yet, is the basis of that deep, longer term alignment with another human, with an organization, with a brand, because it kind of says, yeah, the way you think about this fits with the way I think about this, or at least it's compatible. And so, the reason why I think it's important even for brand work is that we've all had brands where like, well, I like their shoes, but I hate how they do business.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, and for some of us, that ends up being a no-go after a while. You're like, I just can't go there anymore. But we have spent lots of time together. Andrew, thank you for being willing to kind of like put all this out there for everyone else. So yay.
Thank you. It was brilliant. Anybody thinking about doing this, do it, because it's amazing.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everyone else. As always, thanks to Jen running things backstage. Again, sometimes we're topic focused, sometimes we're work focused, and trying to do just show the process to some extent to help people understand why I feel like this is so fundamentally different than the way we typically go about finding a message. This really is about understanding why it is what you do makes sense to you, and then translating it into the structures and the language and the concepts that will make sense to the people that you're really for. Does that mean cutting people out? Not in an othering way. It means making sure that you're being clear enough to include the people that you want to include, and that for anyone else who may be interested by what you offer, even if you hadn't been thinking of them in the beginning, to put what is valuable to you and important to you out and transparent so that other people can see it, evaluate it, and decide for themselves whether or not it's the right thing for them. So as always, thanks so much. See you next time.